What you should know about bees and their extinction. As you are most likely aware, bees are flying insects that collect nectar and pollen. There are over 20,000 species of bees, and they are all different. For example, very few types of bees actually make honey. The most well-known honey-producing bee is the honeybee. Honeybees are about 12.5 millimeters long. They have a hairy body and vary in color from a yellow-brown to dark brown. In the wild, they live in hollowed-out trees. They produce wax to build cells inside of which they store honey and raise their larvae. Inside a typical honeybee colony, there is one queen bee, a fertile female mother of all the bees in the hive. The other bees in the hive follow and fiercely protect her. Next, there will be a few thousand drone bees, male bees that mate with the queen. The drone bees don't have stingers and do not gather nectar and pollen. And finally, tens and thousands of worker bees, sterile females that gather pollen and nectar. To communicate with each other, the worker bees use a pattern of dancing known as the bee dance or waggle dance. Queen bees go on mating flights away from their own hives and mate with multiple drones before returning. A queen will never mate with drones from her home colony. The drone bees die during the act of mating. Honeybees stop flying once temperatures fall below 50 degrees Fahrenheit and form their winter cluster, in which the worker bees huddle around the queen at the center of the hive and shiver, keeping the temperature between 81 to 93 degrees Fahrenheit. The worker bees rotate so none get too cold, and they eat their stored honey. A bee will land on a flower, and their feet will slip into a groove that holds pollen sacs, called stamen, the male reproduction organ of the flower, which sticks to the hairs on the bee's foot. When the bee lands on another flower, the sac falls off and the pollen falls onto the stigma or tip of the pistil, the female reproductive organ of the flower. Fertilization has now happened. There are many factors responsible for the decline in bee population. Colony collapse disorder is the phenomenon that occurs when the majority of worker bees in a colony disappear and leave behind a queen, plenty of food, and a few nurse bees to care for the remaining immature bees. Beekeeping is a critical piece of modern agriculture practices. In the United States alone, beekeeping serves to provide the pollen for over 90% of commercially grown crops, and an annual economic value of over $15 billion. The causes of colony collapse disorder are also causes of general bee endangerment. The use of pesticide has become a necessity for agriculture. Many pesticides are harmful to the bee populations. The pesticides can directly kill bees. When a bee is on the flower at the time of the insecticide application, the bee will die instantly. Other types of insecticides kill bees a few hours later, and others only harm the young immature bees. Neonicotinoids are a type of pesticide that affect bees' central nervous system. It's the most widely used insecticide in the United States. Urbanization both directly removes bee habitat and isolates and fragments the land in which bees need to travel across. This fragmentation reduces gene flow between populations, which decreases genetic diversity. The isolation makes it harder for bees to find mates, have enough nesting sites, and eat enough food in the limited land area. The bees that experience habitat loss suffer nutritional stress because it is more difficult for them to locate valuable food sources. As well, in certain areas, the scarcity of pollen and nectar reduces adult survival rates and offspring, which diminishes the bee populations. As average monthly temperatures rise, flowers bloom earlier, which creates a potential mismatch in seasonal timing between when the flowers produce pollen and when the bees are ready to feed. This mismatch makes bees less likely to reproduce, shrinking offspring numbers as well as hurting the bees. This also affects the crop yields. Bees, like all animals, are susceptible to bacteria, viruses, and parasites. The other previously mentioned factors weaken bee populations, making them more vulnerable to disease. Common diseases are caused by mites,